Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
Do we want to take just a second to talk a little bit about if you're concerned about seizure activity and diet and all the many things that somebody can do? Because again, if they're concerned about seizure activity and this 4-year-old waiting till December has got to be really hard for this mom.
Yeah, I mean, and here are the pros and cons. There are many things that can cause seizures, many different things, right? And Shannon is right. Sometimes it is a reaction to something we eat. Sometimes it has to do with toxins we're exposed to. Sometimes it has to do with lack of sleep, all kinds of things. And you could start doing some things that might help, like changing his diet, so on. Like there are diets that specifically, the Feingold diet specifically focuses on reducing seizure activity. But I'm not sure that I would recommend that because you don't have a baseline yet. You don't know for a fact that he's actually having seizures. And if he is, we don't know what type of seizures. Are there temporal seizures? Are they grand mal? We don't know. There's obviously, they seem to be subclinical. So in other words, they're not visible to you, but you're trying to find out for some reason, you're trying to find out if he's having seizures. So I think you don't really have much of a choice but to find that out first and then do interventions in case he is, then do interventions to reduce the seizure activity, such as the Feingold diet, many other things. But unfortunately, okay, so mom just wrote in, which is actually very telling. And mom is saying, we don't know if he is having seizures or not, but sometimes he does laugh for no reason, even in the middle of the night, or he doesn't respond. Now, laughing for no reason is kind of an interesting one. It could possibly be a seizure, but that's not necessarily where I go first. I'll be honest with you, my mind goes first of all to yeast and whether or not he has some sort of a fungal infection or yeast reaction, because a lot of times when kids have high levels of yeast, or when you've just reduced their yeast intake and they're having what's called yeast die-off, they will act like they're drunk and they will suddenly laugh for no reason at all. So I want to make sure you definitely figure out whether or not he has a yeast infection going on, which you can accurately do with a blood test. Shannon, it looks like you have experience with this.
Oh yes. I mean the dreaded yeast thing, and I do want to say that yeast is one of those things that everybody has a little bit of yeast in their body. It's just a matter of managing it. You don't want to completely get rid of yeast in your body. Nobody wants to do that, but you want to be able to manage it. And when my son, the first time somebody said maybe your child has a yeast issue, I was like, are you talking about like a vaginal yeast infection? He doesn't have a vagina. Do you know? It was like, what? I don't understand. And they were like, no. It's like, your whole body, you can be having a yeast reaction to something. And, it was a little bit going down a rabbit hole for me. And it was a tough rabbit hole to go down. We looked at it first dietary and then biomedically. And the thing about it was I didn't understand what yeast die-off was. So we were about 12 days into a yeast reducing diet. And I was saying to someone who had nothing to do with autism, I said, oh my gosh, my life is just terrible. My son, we were trying this intervention for yeast and my son is so much worse. And so I'm about to stop it. And I can remember right where I was standing outside by her car and she was like, oh gosh, she's a doula. And she was like, don't do that. If you're like 12 days into a yeast infection and you saw that he got worse, that means it is yeast because die off. Yeast, like when you make bread, you guys, and you know how it like grows and you're like the bread expands. That's what happens when you take away the things in the diet. The yeast will expand because it's a living thing and it tries to save itself. So you will see like a bunch of behavior triggered. But I remember the day that the yeast broke when we finally got to the point where my son was not overcome with yeast, and it was so eerie. I remember waking up and I didn't hear anything because he was a busy customer, constantly doing something. He couldn't be awake and us be asleep. That didn't ever happen. But it
Mhm.
was so quiet in the house. And I got up and I was like, what's wrong? He was not in his bed, and he was sitting at the coffee table, and he was very quietly putting Legos together, building a boat,
Mhm.
and he was just concentrated on it. There was no high pitched noises. He wasn't laughing hysterically. We used to call him the drunken elf. And he was
Mhm.
just putting the Legos together. And I woke my husband up and I said, something's wrong, because my child was just sitting. That's how out of the norm it was for him to sit. And I was fearful. I was like, something is really wrong. And when I called his name, he looked at me, and I was like, what happened? It was very, very eerie. But of
Yeah.
course, it led to a period of time when what he learned, he was learning and his charts were like this. We broke the yeast and he went like straight up
Yeah.
what he
Yeah.
was learning. It was crazy how good it was.
Huge, yeah, a huge impact. I mean, I've had that with multiple families, multiple children, where you start treating the yeast, and there are many ways to treat the yeast. Dietary change is one. There are medications, antifungal medications, and honestly, the difference is tremendous. It really is. It's like the child wakes up and starts learning.
Thanks for watching Autism Live. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.